Today I will try to explain default values in Python. So before we begin with the examples, let's try to understand what default values mean. So Python allows function arguments to have default values. If the function is called without the argument gets its default value. So what does that mean? Let's try to understand that with a simple example and build a function called greet. So what this function going to do is that it's going to greet people according to our parameters. So which is going to be name, surname, plus the message. So this function is going to print hi plus the name plus space plus surname plus a space again, then the message. So let's try to call this function. Our name will be Albert, Einstein, and our message will be good morning. So let's run this. So as you can see, it prints out the hi Albert Einstein good morning message. So as you can see, function takes this good morning as a parameter. But is there any other way to make this thing work? So what do I mean by this is that can I initialize this message variable somewhere else, which I can do it inside of the function. So let's try to run it again. And as you can see, it prints out the same thing, which means I can initialize some things inside of the function. So why would I do that? Why it is useful? To better understand this, let's try to make a thought experiment. So imagine that you are an app builder and you are building an app, a social media app, let's say, and this app is going to greet people every time they log in. So you don't want to put this parameter inside of this function every time you call the function. So what you're going to do is that you can basically initialize this message variable inside of the function, since you know that it's not going to be changed. The only things that will change is that name and the surname. The good morning message will be same all the time. But let's say you want to change the message. Let's say you have two type of customers in your two type of user in your app, normal users and premium users. And of course you want to greet the premium users in a different way. You don't want to say good morning, but you want to say something else. So for this, you can still initialize this variable inside of the function. Let's say you can say have a wonderful day. So let's try to run it again. As you can see, it prints out hi Albert Einstein, have a wonderful day. So what's happening is if we initialize this variable inside of the function, it uses that parameter that we just give. But if we do not initialize this, it will print out the default value that we put. So if we run this greet function a couple more times, we can see it works as we predicted. It might not look so helpful here, this default value method, because we have like 2 to 3 parameters at most. But if you have 5 or even 10 parameters inside of a single function, it will be very exhausting to put all those things whenever you call that function. If you don't use this method. So let's try and add different parameters inside of our function. Let's say weather. So we want our app to show weather every time the customer logs in. But if you do that and run the file, you'll see that Python gives you error. It says non-default argument follows default argument. You can not put a non-default argument after a default argument. It's because that how will function know if you are initializing the message variable or not? Let's say you call the greet function and you put name, surname, and you say 30 degrees. How will function know if it belongs to message or if it belongs to weather? So because of this, you cannot put non-default argument after a default argument. So let's make the weather a default argument. Let's say it is 30 degrees outside. I mean, of course, weather cannot be a default value. It will change in hourly basis, but for the sake of our example, let's say it is a default variable. But before the weather, let's put our dates, and let's make the date also a default value. Let's say it is 3rd of March. Those variables inside of our print function. So let's try to call this greet function again with a different name. Let's say Enrico, Heli, and let's leave the message as it is. It will be good morning. I don't want to change the message, but I want to change the date. It's not 30 or 30th of the March, but let's say 2nd of October. How will I do that? How will the Python know if I'm not changing the message, but the date? For this, you have to put the name of the variable like this, then an equal sign, then you have to initialize it. 2nd of October. As you see, Python changes the date value and makes it 2nd of October. And I also don't want to change the weather. Let's call this function. As you see here, it says, hi Enrico, Holly, good morning, 2nd of October, 30 degrees outside. After you initialize one default variable here, you cannot initialize another default variable without putting its name. Let's say you want to change the weather. As you can see, weather comes after the date. So let's say 34 degrees and try to run it. Let's say position, the Python gives you an error and it says positional argument follows keyword argument. Because that Python literally has no way to know if you are calling the weather or let's say another parameter. Because of that, you have to put the weather equals 35 degrees, and this time it will work. As you can see, hi Enrico, Heli, good morning, 2nd of October, 34 degrees. Let's call this function a couple of more times. So let's change the names a bit. Let's say John, Heli, John, Nick, and this might be Stefan. Hawking. So this time I want to change the only message here. So all the other parameters will be same. So for this, let's say hope you have a wonderful day. And in the third one, I want to change every parameter. For this, let's say, hope you have a good day. And for the date, let's say 3rd of March and 22 degrees outside. And let's run this function. As you can see, it works as we predicted. Nothing wrong. It didn't give any exceptions this time. So I tried to cover anything I could in this video. If you liked the video, please like and share, and if you have any questions, please ask me in the comments below.